Hey crew, what's happening over here? It's Mr. Wiskin, and just like I promised, I said I'd give you a little bit of a brief overview of how I understand, or what strategies I use to understand Shakespeare. And the first thing I'd want to say is, if you take one thing from this, it's know that understanding Shakespeare is hard. Even though I've read like 18 or 19 or something of his plays, every time I read something new, or I even reread something like Romeo and Juliet, it's a challenge because the language is, well, just challenging. So don't despair if you find it hard. It's hard because it is hard. So take your time, go through it slowly, and really work at building your understanding of Shakespeare. And if you use these sort of three general strategies I'll give you, it will definitely help you in your understanding of Shakespeare itself. And you'll find it a little bit easier to understand what he's talking about. So the three general things I do and the three strategies I use is I preview the text, I use good reading strategies, and I also go very, very slowly. So I'll take you through an example from Macbeth, where it's something I'm familiar with. I can go through it quickly. And then what I'll do is I'll model an example. I've never read As You Like It, so I'll just try to understand the first little bit as best I can. So the first thing I usually do when I'm reading a play is I preview the text. My first thing I go to is always SparkNotes. SparkNotes is good because it gives some general info about things. There's context, plot overview. The good thing I like is the summary and the analysis of the major theme or major scenes. So in this case, we're going to be going through Act 1, Scene 2. So what I would do is I would start off in, I'd go Act 1, Scenes 1 to 4, read the summary of it, military camp, blah, blah, King Duncan asks the wounded captain. So it gives a general overview. What else I like about it is usually analyzes the main chunk, in this case, Scenes 1 to 4. So it'll go through, talk a little bit about some themes, some deeper ideas. So I usually start here to get a general understanding of what's happening. Another good website I do go to is this place called Shakespeare Navigator. Shakespeare Navigator is at the top. And what's really good about this one here is it has detailed scene summary, character reviews. There's some annotated links and things, talks about some major themes. So you can get a lot of really, really good info here. So if I wanted to look at Act 1, Scene 2, I would simply click on it, click on the scene. And what you can see here is it seems a bit more in depth than the SparkNotes version and gives sort of line and numbers. So in case you're wondering, whenever you see things like 1.2, 0.8 to 9, it just means Act 1, then the dot, then afterwards Scene 2, dot, and then lines 8 to 9. So I'd go through here, read through some of this, and go from there. Another thing I'd go through, which goes into a little bit more depth, I don't know if I do this at the beginning, but I always go back to Smoop because it gives a summary here. There's some major themes analyzed, which is always good because this website is sort of, as you go through things, it'll take a look at these themes here, and then it'll show you the line numbers where these themes are developed. So it doesn't give you a general plot overview, but goes into a lot more depth of some major ideas. Looks at major quotes, characters. There's a general analysis of literary devices and things like that. So a lot of great things in Smoop. So even before reading the text, preview what's coming up in the text so you're not so worried about understanding everything as you go through things. So in this case, let me just go to Macbeth online text. And what I'll do is I'll go through the scene. Okay, let's go. Act 1, Scene 2. Pretty simple and straightforward here. And so what I've done now is I've already previewed the text. I sort of know what's coming up. That takes a lot of the tension away from reading here. At times, I do use the No Fear Shakespeare thing, just because of the fact that I do my best to understand how the scene works by itself. So I'll read it. I usually have a book of this, and I write down a lot of ideas in my book. And I try to understand what Shakespeare means here, but sometimes I'll go back and be like, okay, I need clarification on a few things here. It doesn't make too much sense. So let's just go through. I'll go through a short little passage with you here, and basically, so Duncan asking, what bloody man is that? Can he report about the battle? Malcolm basically says, yeah, he fought against my captivity, and tell the king what happened. And so then I would start, and now we're talking about as I'm reading itself. A few of the things that I make sure I do when I'm reading, after I've done previewing the text, I'm actually going into the reading of it now. One thing is monitor what you're thinking of. And the biggest thing I could say with Shakespeare is you can't have any distractions while you're reading there. Our short-term memory can only hold so much. So if you're listening to music, watching TV, watching a video, you're not going to understand it as well. So for whatever time you need, put aside those distractions so you could focus 100% on what you're trying to understand. That'll make a huge difference, because if I'm listening to my favorite tune, I'm not really paying attention to the text. Okay, one thing that I do as well, and I'll give you guys a lot of sticky notes, is I annotate. Basically, I write down what my thinking is, and I'll show you guys my books, and they're just scribbles everywhere about ideas, words, and things like that that'll help me better understand thoughts and ideas, major themes. So one of the things I would say as you read this is annotate. Like, write down your thoughts, your ideas, feelings, comments, anything you can, because that'll force you to pay attention and write down your thinking, even if it's just a sentence. And that's one thing that you can definitely do. One other thing, a few things that I like to do as well, good reading strategies, is ask a lot of questions as I'm reading here. Like, why is this character doing this? What's the idea here? What's so important about that? And that's one of the things I tend to do a lot. Another thing I tend to do a lot is to make connections. And making connections are good because it gives you something to anchor your ideas on, like, oh, this reminds me of, or something like that. But just know, we're going to work a lot on annotations in class. Just know that when I'm reading, I don't have any distractions, and I try to annotate a lot and write down my thinking. And what I'll do is, actually, I'll make a second video now that I think about it. I'll show you this page of it, and I'll show you what stuff I sort of annotate. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go through this little passage that stood here. And one thing, even one more thing I have to mention is, know that Shakespeare does write in full sentences. Like, this line itself isn't a sentence. Start from here, you have a semicolon there, so this here is an entire sentence here. It starts here, ends at a period. The merciless MacDonald isn't a sentence. The next sentence starts here. It's a longer one, and there's a lot of semicolons and things like that. Well, technically, it goes all the way down here. So if there's a really, really long sentence, one thing I would say for Shakespeare is figure out where the sentences start, because they have full ideas. So in this case, this is one idea, and in this case, this is another idea. Looks daunting. So what I would say from there is, what I would do is I'd go from there and look for breaks, like smaller breaks. Like, semicolons are big in Shakespeare. These dashes are big. And as well, I think look for the commas as well, because those sort of break up ideas into smaller chunks. So let's get going here. I know where my sentences are. If you need to start slow, start with your sentences. Okay, here's a complete idea. So basically, Malcolm says, say to the king the knowledge of the broil as thou didst leave it, as you left it. Doubtful it stood. Okay, doubtful, I know the battle. So the battle was doubtful. As two spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art. So I'm thinking, okay, so the battle was doubtful, like two spent swimmers. Okay, two tired swimmers, they're clinging together and choke their art. I'm like, well, what the heck does it mean by choke their art? One thing I would check for is, I would go and maybe look at the text itself and see if choke their art actually is in there. Or one thing I'd go, no fear Shakespeare, and say, for a while I couldn't tell who would win. The armies were like two exhausted swimmers clinging to each other and struggling in the water, unable to move. Oh, okay, so choke their art. They were unable to move because they were clinging together. So at the odd time, I would go to No Fear Shakespeare to get an understanding of what this line means. So I get that the battle was doubtful, and there's imagery, like two swimmers trying to fight each other, but not going anywhere. Okay, so let's see what this next one. The merciless MacDonald. And I notice a dash. The next dash is over here. So I know the merciless MacDonald. This is all going to be about him. Worthy to be a rebel. For to that the multiplying villainies of nature do swarm upon him. Okay, so there seems to be this MacDonald in the battle, and he's a rebel, and he has a lot of villainy. He's a really bad guy, so lots of villainy. He does a lot of bad things. Okay, because I'm taking it slowly here. So, the merciless MacDonald, worthy to be a rebel. For to that the multiplying villainies of nature do swarm upon him. Pause. I have a pause there. From the western isles of kerns and gallow glasses is supplied. Okay, so MacDonald, sort of off topic, not off topic, it stops this. He's a very, very bad guy. He was supplied by the Western Isles. And here I'm thinking, well, what the heck is the Western Isles? Don't really know. So what I do is I check my book and see if there's anything in there. I'd go back to No Fear Shakespeare. Supported by soldiers and horsemen from Ireland and the Hebrides. Okay, whatever that is. I probably have to go search what that is. But I get the sense that, okay, he's supplied by foot soldiers and horsemen. Okay, so I know that MacDonald has, he's supported with people from Ireland, and he has foot soldiers, and he's a bad guy, and the battle was doubtful. Okay, because remember, take this thing slowly. If I read this whole thing and tried to understand it, I wouldn't understand it. I have to go slow and take it pace by pace here. Okay, And fortune on his damned quarrel smiling showed like a rebel's whore. Okay, so fortune, if I try to understand it, so there seems to be luck played in here on his damned quarrel smiling. So fortune seems to be smiling at this fight. Showed like a rebel's whore. So probably fortune maybe was on the side of MacDonald. I'd check the book, see what's there, and I'd move from there. But all's too weak. Okay, I think he's talking about he's too weak here. For brave Macbeth, again a dash, well he deserves that name. Oh, Macbeth is brave. Disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution, like valor's minion, carved out his passage till he faced the slave. So again, I have a large chunk from a dash to a semicolon here, so let's understand this part. For brave Macbeth, well he deserves that name. Okay, so this is all about Macbeth now. We already have fortune up here and fortune up here. So disdaining, forgetting all about fortune, with his brandished steel, so his sword, which smoked with bloody execution. So he just, comma, talking about the sword, comma. If you know your punctuation, you're good. So he's killing everybody. Like valor's minion carved out a passage till he faced the slave. So he's just cutting people down till he faces MacDonald, which ne'er shook hands nor bade farewell to him. Okay, I guess Macbeth still never shook MacDonald's hands, nor did he say goodbye to him, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chaps and fixed his head upon our battlements. Oh, that's great. So I know that Macbeth goes to fight MacDonald, and this I just happen to know that this means unseamed him from the nave to the chaps. So cut MacDonald open from the stomach all the way to his chaps, his neck, and fixed his head upon our battlements. And he chops off his head and puts it on the battlements. So one thing I would say here is, and if you don't understand something, go back and reread it. So this is the third thing I want to say. I've sort of gone through a passage with you. I've previewed something with you. But definitely reread if you need to and go slow. Notice I didn't rush through this thing from beginning to doubtful to the end at battlements and tried to understand everything. I went slowly. I looked for the punctuation. I made sure I understood. I went back to No Fear Shakespeare. I started by previewing. So I would say go slow. That's some of the best advice I can give you. Go sentence by sentence. If it's a really long sentence, go like dash to dash, or like look for the semicolons. Look for the colons right here. Because that tells you an idea is being sort of stopped and finished there, and another idea that's similar is starting. So look for those and try to go slowly but surely. And the other thing I would say is know that just every line, that's not a sentence in itself. That's not a sentence by itself. Neither is that. So just because it's one line doesn't mean it's a sentence. So I hope that gives you some understanding of how to read and understand Shakespeare. What I'll do is I'll show you guys, I'll model a video in a little bit, probably not today, but tomorrow I'll have it up, where what I'll do is I'll go through a play that I haven't read before, so it'll be a little bit longer as you like it. I've never read that before, and I'll try to show you how I would understand the first few lines of it to help you guys out. So I hope this has been helpful, everybody. Take care and have fun understanding Shakespeare.